One night, I was at home by myself. My sibling and I live on the upper floor of our split-level home, which serves as an apartment, while our parents live downstairs. It's cozy. It was over the weekend, and since it was raining outside and my buddies weren't interested in going anywhere, I decided to stay indoors. I stayed up late watching scary movies in my room. I had never seen the movie The Physician's Rest, but I was absorbed in the narrative and couldn't take my eyes off it. I stopped the film to get something to eat in the kitchen. After getting a box of crackers from the cupboard, I noticed a disturbance from downstairs that I initially ignored. I returned to my room, shut the door, and watched the movie again. I heard noises coming from immediately beneath my bedroom on the lower level, which sounded like the back door was shut. I also observed that the motion sensor light in the backyard was suddenly on. To be clear, my room is on the same floor as my parents', right above the back door to the house. Our house has fragile walls, so even the slightest noise from downstairs may be heard. I could tell immediately that someone was downstairs, and when I stopped the video, I could hear footsteps. I inquired in my family group chat who had recently made a comeback. In less than a minute, my mother responded, saying they weren't home. This indicated that my brother had to be the culprit, even though it was strange because he never entered from the rear. It wasn't meant to be him home that evening either. I wrote, "I hear someone downstairs," in the group conversation. "Alex, is that you?" He remained silent until they were out of sight. I could hear footsteps coming from the front of the house. Next, I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. I switched the television off. The footsteps were going directly to my room, avoiding all other rooms and going along the hallway. They had a strong sound. When they got to my door, it opened. I lay motionless on my bed, feigning to close my eyes, but I could only narrow my eyes enough to see a head glaring at me through the open doorway. I could only see the person's eyes in the darkness, which did not seem to be Alex's. I lay there pretending to sleep, and the person stood at the doorway watching me for what felt like an age. They shut the door after maybe 30 to 60 seconds, but I didn't hear them leave. I sent the following message to my family group chat: "Alex, please tell me you're in the house." All capital letters. In an almost instantaneous response, he asked, "No, what are you talking about?" That's when I told them there was a visitor in the house. I started whispering into the phone when I dialed 911. I eventually heard footsteps leaving my door at that point, even in a whisper. He must have heard me begin to talk. From my perception, the footsteps went down the stairs, and then they were gone. I was told to wait on the dispatcher's line until assistance. 5 minutes later, I heard a knock at the downstairs door, so I went downstairs to let the cops in when the dispatcher said it was okay. Police officers in my region work in pairs, and the two that arrived with me searched the entire house, going into every cupboard and bed. They departed as soon as they were confident the house was clear. It was as easy as one of my parents had unlocked the back door. After an event like this, there was no way to sleep. I would have to spend the night alone because no one would be home until the next day. After the cops left, the backyard motion sensor light went off again. It had been triggered by something. I noticed a man strolling away from the house and into a dark section of the backyard before he vanished from view as I peered out my window. He might have tried to enter the residence once more, but the door was locked. I looked out the window as long as the motion light was on. It was too dark to see anything outside when it shut off. Luckily, he never came back. Whether someone enters your home or not can be determined by taking a few seconds to lock your doors. My parents forgot to close the door, so I'll always be plagued by the unnerving vision of that person's head poking through my door and staring at me. Their eyes in particular. I'll never forget that picture. Nonetheless, the sight of those individuals near my campsite unnerved me. As a precaution, I relocated my campsite further up the lake over the next hour. I then began chopping wood for a campfire and prepared dinner. Heating some chili, Max suddenly began barking at something in the forest while I sat by the fire, writing in my journal. With the darkness having set in, I could only see what was illuminated by the fire. Slightly uneasy, I peered into the shadows, but eventually brought Max inside the tent and extinguished the flames to avoid drawing attention to our location. I crawled into my sleeping bag and began reading a book with my reading lamp nearby. Max continued to prick his ears, alert to sounds I couldn't hear, and scanned the tent's walls. I wondered what was causing his agitation. He eventually snarled, his attention seemingly fixed on something outside, possibly a bear, deer, or person. The thought of an unknown person lurking in the darkness troubled me more than the possibility of encountering a bear. After some time, Max calmed down, and I turned off my lantern, hoping for a peaceful night's rest. A few hours later, there. Max's growling and barking awakened me. I hushed him, straining my ears to listen. I heard someone whistling, the kind used to get a dog's attention. Max reacted with renewed snarling, and I was terrified that someone was at our campsite in the pitch-black darkness. Instead of whistling, the person outside the tent began making clicking sounds. Their footsteps drew closer to the tent and then stopped abruptly just outside. I managed to quiet Max, who was howling hysterically, without saying a word. In the absence of the crackling campfire, the night was eerily silent. Max growled again and turned his head towards the tent's zipper. There was a pause before the person outside the tent whistled again. Max erupted in agitation again, prompting me to bluff. "You better leave. I'm armed." However, my voice betrayed my fear and sounded more terrified than commanding. The footsteps retreated slowly and eventually faded away, or perhaps they stopped short of the tent, as Max intermittently growled for nearly an hour afterwards. I was too frightened to venture outside and pack up in the dark, but I couldn't sleep. My phone had no signal in the wilderness, rendering me unable to contact friends or family. Then, I heard a woman's distant scream, echoing for what seemed like miles. It sounded like a distressed woman, and it was the last straw. I put on my boots, grabbed a flashlight, took Max, and left. I sprinted back to my vehicle, following the same path I had taken initially. My phone still had no signal, so I spent the night in my truck. The following day, Max and I returned to the campsite. I hastily packed up my belongings and disassembled the tent without checking if anything needed to be added or misplaced. I just wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Within 30 minutes, I was on my way out. As soon as I had cell reception, I called the non-emergency police number I found online to report the woman's scream and the suspicious individuals at my campsite the previous night. I never returned to that campsite and remained unsure of what had happened to my belongings or what had transpired in those woods.